Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Rap. Today, I'm joined by Phil Anderson, director at The Forum. Thank you, Phil, for joining me today. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, really looking forward to this one. First time of doing something like this. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
It's great to have you on. I know Chris has been on a few times, but I'm hoping for just a different level from you. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I suggest that's a higher level. So that's good. Yeah, no, I'm sure I can do that.
And let's start with and we're going to delve into a bit about you, and because I'm sure loads of people have seen you and talk and heard you talk, and it's obvious you absolutely know what you're talking about. But I'm really interested in your backstory, and we'll get to that. But before that, something we talked about before recording was, what understanding the why, and we do it as leaders, but why should people listen to this, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it sounds sometimes so obvious as a starting point, doesn't it? What's the purpose? Why? But too often we're all in such a busy motion, we just go through the motions. We don't often think. So yeah, I thought actually let's think about this properly. Let's spend a little bit of time for once me talking about myself and just do a little bit of a background story from how I got into the world of starting on the phones, which I'm sure everyone can relate to. And then I think a really important part of learning that we play down is about validation. So I want to just get that across, that actually listening, you might go, do you know what, I'm doing some of them things and they're working. So that means I'm on the right tracks. Because again, if you don't know when you can't validate your starting point, how do you know how to improve? And then, yeah, the last thing I'm always, again, conscious of, especially with anything we do with a forum, is about taking away at least one thing. Because if you can just be that little bit better every day, do you know what, this time tomorrow I'll be better, this time next year, look how much better I can be, as opposed to thinking I'm too busy to do anything today. And then before you know it, it's a week gone by, it's a month gone by, and it's 6 months since you went, do you know what, I've not validated what I know. And actually, I don't think I've actually learned anything new. So yeah, those three things I will hopefully cover off in the time we have available.
I love it. I love it. Just that the concept of progression, I think, is so important. So I'm really looking forward to it. But you kind of teased us there, and that phrase that a lot of us know, started on the phones. So let's take us back. When did you start on the phones?
So yeah, it was June the 20th, 1999 to be precise.
Wow, exact.
Yeah, and I do always remember it quite clearly. It actually, yeah, it was one of those things. I always thought, I don't think I'll end up being there, which again is probably quite a lot of people happen. But again, I just finished at university, which I didn't enjoy. Didn't enjoy my time at university. I felt quite disconnected to the learning. And again, I'll probably touch on that later on. I felt there was a big gap between what the lecturers were saying, what I was then doing. I felt bored. I wasn't energized by it. I didn't feel particularly supported. But at the same time, I didn't put anything extra into it. I just sort of allowed the learning to come to me, and it didn't really happen. Whereas my previous sort of couple of years at college, absolutely loved. I had 2 years there of being sort of so well supported and really encouraged, and they sort of gave you this belief that you can do whatever you wanted. That really took me into that. So I was in a point of going, look, university, I'm not going to finish this. I didn't enjoy it. End of year 2, I just thought, let's get out at this point. And I found a job at a relatively local contact centre working in travel. I've done like a travel and leisure degree. And so I thought that might be the obvious step in. So yeah, it was a company called Gold Medal Travel, who were an independent sort of travel agent, who were very much growing at the time, 1999. This is pre-September 11th. So this is a huge sort of growth period for that, people booking those types of holidays. So yeah, it was quite an entry really into that world of working in contact centres. And again, just to put it into perspective, we were sort of upstairs in this quite small sort of typical 1990s built office, whereby the first job you had to do was put the air conditioning unit out of the window each day and then shut the window. It was about 6 months after smoking had been banned in the office, so you could still see these like circles of grey on the polystyrene, and you were still seeing some people who needed sort of 3 or 4 cigarette breaks a day, or even a morning, just to get through the sort of day. So it wasn't a proper contact centre background, so which again is that classic thing of people going, it wasn't a call centre, even though I was sat there with a headset on taking calls all day. It was the denial of what it was. It was an office. We were highly specialist doing sort of travel, but it was quite it was a hell of a learning curve really, because yes, we were supportive, but at the same time we were quite thrown in, so you had to sort of learn resilience, you know what I mean? There was, you had to learn to just get on with it. You had to learn the harshness of, there was a basic wage and you had to earn more money by selling, so it was down to you. So you have to take responsibility to get better, essentially, because it wasn't brutal, it was a lovely environment, hence why there's still people who I'm in touch with now who are still working for the organization, because there's lots of good things about it. But yeah, that was my sort of entry into the world back in the day.
It's very similar to mine, actually. I can remember that selling stationery was mine, and ours was similar. We had like a minimal salary, and the only way you could make a decent wage was, and I think it was something like 10-90 sort of split, was sales. And you had some basic, how do you use the phone and the green screen computer system? Here's our catalogue, here's what's going to happen, off you go. And to have days upon days upon days, especially at the start, of no sales, and just thinking, I have no idea how I'm gonna crack this puzzle. And that, when you talk to something you said, really resonated with me. I can remember being at college, and it was a small group. It was there was more motor vehicle studies going on than A level, so we were a small group, and you felt really close to your teachers, and they would engage you in these small group conversations. And I remember going to uni in big lecture halls and just thinking, I have no clue what's going on here. I don't feel engaged. So that's a really, really kind of key point you make there. How long did you stay there then at the travel contact center?
Yeah, 11 years. So that was, I've only had 2 jobs essentially, but it's the world has changed in that time. But yeah, there was 11 years at Gold Medal, then joined the Forum in 1st December 2010. So yeah, during that time I did 4 years on the phones, working in different departments. So I always quite like more specialist things. So whereas I started off selling essentially round the world, European sort of flights, tailor-made holidays, then went into business class department, which was interesting, looking at sort of even selling sort of Concorde, things like that. And then went into the groups department, which again was really good. So again, this was, when I look back now, I can really see how this helped me, because it gave me the empowerment. There was only me in the department, so everything was down. But then there was 2 of us sort of thing, and we sort of grew that department to about a team of 8, which then got me into being a team leader for the first time. I then went into being a trainer as well, because I started training people to come in, because I think people had identified that the way I looked at things, if you can speed up processes, so in other words, if you know where all the countries are, then you know your 3-letter airport codes, and then know your airlines, you've got half the conversation. You can start to sort of really take over a conversation and sound like you know what you're doing, which then in turn gives you the belief and confidence then to sort of work on other things. And yeah, I sort of really enjoyed that time. So the first 4 years were all of those things. And then even though I was enjoying it and I'd got myself that sort of team leader position, I was very conscious that what was the next step. I think at that time in my life as well, I was thinking I probably want to start getting a house and things like that. I thought, I need to probably make this more of a career. And I didn't at that point in time feel like the team leader or operational manager was quite the career I wanted. And then also an opportunity came up in an organization that was growing all the time as a business analyst. So it couldn't have been a more vague, ambiguous sort of job title, but within a relatively newly formed resource planning team. So got the job. About 3 months later, the job changed. It became more of a medium-term forecaster and scheduler. Then it became sort of resource planning. And then this little team of 4 became 1, because so there's only me there. So all of a sudden I was on my own doing resource planning for about sort of 6 months or so. And then, so that was the sort of the starting point of this sort of high interest into in particular resource planning.
And I love that, because it does point to the options that you have available in our industry. So it doesn't always have to be team leader, contact center manager up through the ops chain, does it? It can be, I've developed skills here now. Now I'm going to pivot really to something, like you say, very different. But all of that previous knowledge and experience must have helped you when you come to running all of the resource planning on your own.
Definitely. I think part of that was, again, thinking back, I knew people. So therefore, I had not only a name, a face to the name, I also knew them. I knew their personality. I knew their interest. I know which ones had like season tickets. So based in the Northwest, we had quite a few people who were Blackpool season ticket holders. We had quite a few Preston season ticket holders. So we used to create schedules. Therefore, they'd work opposite each other, so you could always watch the home games. And it's little things like that you sort of play down at the time, but you look back now and go, actually, that was quite a good idea, really, in terms of you're picking up on something local around how we can help people, and it focuses on what matters most to them. Again, you'd get to know people in terms of them coming over to, and you know which ones have childcare issues. So those subtle tweaks you could do on shifts for people, that again would just make such a difference. So again, I think very early on I was aware of the people behind the numbers, which I think was really important for resource planning. I was also aware of, again, how numbers told you one part of the story, but then actually there's the reality behind this. So yes, I can do a forecast based on trends, but actually there's so many variables, especially in travel, that could mean even if certain departments had quite a sort of static profile, if the volcano went off like 2010, it can just change everything. Or like September 11th when it happened, how it just changed booking profiles. And so there was an understanding that the forecast was just the guide to help you understand how to get the right people in the right place. And it was around other key decisions about, say, recruitments, upskilling and things like that were probably more important than some of the resource planning fundamentals, so to speak.
I think the thing you were saying at the start then, that's employee engagement right there. Because I imagine those guys and girls would be so much more engaged when they know that you've made allowances. That's a work-life balance. That is really, you're going to be able to use your season ticket holder, but you're going to be on the following weekend. Yeah, no problem. Sign me up. Yeah,
I think it was hugely important. It's difficult because you end up with a queue of people next to your desk all the time. However, it was really important. I must admit, when I started to develop the resource planning team towards my end of my tenure there, we put the planning team right in the middle of the contact centre next to the head of operations, so that we could hear everything she was saying, to just go, please don't do that, or like she could hear from us. I say that joking, we worked really well together. That was one of the things. But also we sat in the middle. We then put the induction bays either side of us, so when people first came in, we could hear what they were saying. We could start to get to know them, start to put that sort of face to the name. And then we always allowed people to come over to us at our desk. Even when we were busy, we'd always have that time when people could come over, interrupt us and ask a question, which I thought was hugely valuable. And that sort of open door, literally, because we're sat in the middle of the contact centre, I think played really well with engagement. I mean, we definitely didn't get it right all the time, but we did our best. There was often a reason behind that. And again, in many respects, we often had battles with the ops managers, because they'd say, why did we let them go home today? And it's just like, well, do you know what? It's not the end of the world if they're coming home today because we're not that quiet. And out of that, slowly started to create an understanding of that power of one and what service levels are all about. Yes, there might be 2 calls queuing now, but it's the beginning of the day. Of course there is. Don't worry about that. Worry about at 11:30 when it's the busiest time of the day. That's when we've got everybody there. And it was those sorts of things that I think sometimes you need those battles to sort of draw out understanding, to help people understand the reason why you're doing it.
Those interactions, every single one, it must have been something that, especially if you're new into a role, that's really out your comfort zone when you've got somebody saying, I need to do this. And you've got so much going through your head, that kind of, human nature is I kind of want to say yes, or just maybe even if so you can just go away. Those countless interactions, would you say that's learning in progress right there?
Very much so. I think, it gives you a learning of an individual, which I think is nice, because especially nowadays, the future really of planning future contact centres and people is about personalisation, really understanding individuals so that we can tailor their learning, tailor how we develop those people, give them the autonomy to be able to do that, but also help them to grow as a person and individual. And absolutely, it was a huge amount of learning for us, because again, if we came to a shift review, we'd have that understanding of, yes, on paper we can do X, but the reality of it is we can't. I think it would help with conversations with HR. again, they could be very sort of either policy driven or very sort of, oh, we're on the side of the person, when we would then be able to give that context of, okay, well, from a business point of view, this is what we need to do. From a budget point of view, this is all we've got. So if we do this, then this is what will happen. So trying to sort of bring that conversation earlier than it happening on the day, sort of saying, if we make those decisions now, in 6 months' time, we're going to have these types of problems. And then when those problems happen, at least people then aren't going, you didn't tell us this would happen. We're saying, well, that can happen. It's very, very, very possible. So yeah, I think it's a huge part of learning. It also helps you realize that often many things are temporary. So someone comes over to you with the biggest problem in the world, and you don't want to make a permanent change, because actually in 3 months' time that could change again. So being adaptable. So yeah, we can look after you for now, because this is not treating everything as a one-off, but treating things with the understanding of, this has probably got an expiry date on it. So it's going to happen now until that point. Keep the conversation going, and we can keep looking after you. Don't come over to us, tell us something, and then in 6 years' time go, oh, I've not had that problem for years now. It's like, well, you've not told us. He's trying to keep that dialogue going. And the classic one on that one is the term time hours, isn't it? Someone says, I can only work, term time hours now, and then when the child's 18, working alongside them, they still want to work term time, because guess what? The life is now built around that, isn't it? You won't want to change. And so it's keeping that dialogue going, which is really important.
And at that point in your career, were you aware of the forum? Had you started doing stuff with them, or? So
interesting story on that one is, I say, I'd done about 3 years, I think it was, in resource planning at Gold Medal, not having any development as such, other than just all pure on the job. Again, back in the day, we were using QMax, so one of those early sort of workforce management. So I'd had some work, some days with them, and then I actually handed my notice in. And it was at that point the business thought, do you know what? It's going to be quite hard to replace someone. So they said to me, we'll give you the manager's job, give you a pay rise, and we'll put you on a training course. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's exactly what I was looking for. And it was at the time a 2-year course with the professional planning forum, as it was then. So that was the starting point. So that was late 2006 when that happened. And then, yeah, that started the journey really, whereby at the time it was monthly tutorials or some monthly mentoring type sessions, and you'd do some training courses, and you'd write documents up on this as well. So yeah, that was what I was wanting. The reason why I wanted that is because I felt I was doing some good things, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know this was the right thing. I kept thinking, surely there's a better way. That was my sort of motivation. There must be something better than Excel out there for forecasting. There must be something better than just looking at week on week, or you're looking like regression analysis. There must be something out there. And as I started speaking to other people, say going to like forum events, you started going, that's a good idea. And sometimes they were a bit out there, some of these ideas, and you'd take it, you'd come back, and then you'd have a go yourself. And then, yeah, out of that just grew new ideas. Say some worked, some didn't, but I was also very good at working out that's not work because of, trying to understand the reason why. Because sometimes you come up with a new idea and it might not land straight away, but it might be because of the timing, or it could just be actually how you've articulated this. I remember the first time I introduced the planning wheel, the sort of shrinkage cycle. And people just went, I can't believe this. We've got to improve occupancy. It's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say on this one. What I'm saying is we're not doing enough communication time, not doing enough one-to-ones. And the bigger problem is people aren't logged on enough. That's the problem. It's not about occupancy. So I realized very quickly that you can give people too much information, slow it down, do it bit by bit, and then give them the sort of overall improvement. So yeah, it was 2006, 2007 was when it started, and then that was like a 2-year sort of learning journey, which was really good for confidence, really good for building up skills. And at that point, I will admit I wasn't the best networker in the world, but I slowly started just to get different contacts. And then the other thing I noticed at that time was how we were using a system for doing web analytics at the time, and they always wanted people to speak. They said, who could speak? I thought, do you know what? Let's give that a go. I just thought, what's the worst that could happen, sort of thing. And so I started putting myself out there to do these little sort of presentation opportunities. And I must admit, I didn't necessarily enjoy it, but I could see afterwards what I'd improved on. And it was quite interesting how all of a sudden this one presentation I ended up doing 3 or 4 times in like it was like a user group. Then I did it at Call Center Expo, and then did it at another expo. And that again just gave me the confidence. I just thought of practicing sort of presenting.
I think those kind of that kind of journey makes you, when you're on the spot and you're nervous and you go back to I was going to say where you're comfortable, but not comfortable in a non-learning kind of way, but you're comfortable in your knowledge, and you go, I'm exposed here, I'm out of my comfort zone, I'm gonna talk about what I know and put it out there and be ready for whatever that feedback looks like. And then, as you say, if you kind of progressively go, you know what, I kind of did the end, I need to improve the end, and the next time I'm gonna do it better. I think once you started that on that path, it becomes addictive, doesn't it, to kind of go to seek out those moments where you're challenging yourself.
Definitely. I think it's one of those things I've always noticed, that if you give something a go and then do it again, you're slightly better. And so you start thinking, I wonder where this could go then. And then if I can see someone else doing something, I always think, well, I must be able to give that a go. I'm never sort of, there's a few things, obviously. I don't think Cirque du Soleil is quite my sort of thing, but I recognize that now. But again, but back in the day, I probably would have given it a go, sort of thing. But I quite wouldn't mind giving Ninja Warrior a go. You know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. But yeah, if I see someone else presenting, I keep thinking, I quite like what they've done. I think I'd have done that like this. And then I think to myself, well, let's give that a go then if they can do it. And then you start recognizing about, actually, the more practice you do, especially if it's purposeful practice, you can improve. So we know, the expression practice makes perfect. It's more practice makes permanence, isn't it? Because the more you practice, if you're not making subtle tweaks, you'll just become really good at being either bang average. Whereas if you can just keep adding little bits to it, and again, the other side, I think I've mentioned, is not being afraid to make a mistake. I think that's what I recognized very early on with some of the presentations, being quite nervous about it. And then you realize afterwards, people come up to you and say, I couldn't do that. And so straight away you go, okay, well, that's good. They can't even do something. So at least I'm the one giving it a go. And then often they'll say, I like this, this, and this. And then you find out as well that actually people sometimes relate to you because you're a little bit nervous and you're not perfect. Because they're thinking, actually, that's really good. That's like me. I think I could do that. So again, I don't practice being average, but I keep trying to make the improvements, but you sort of think, I don't want to be too slick about it. I don't want to practice to the point that there's this sort of perfect monologue because then it doesn't feel genuine, does it? People feel like, oh, that's been so well rehearsed. Actually, I can't relate to that anymore. So I think practice is something that is so important, whether it's the 10,000 hours rule that's been sort of mentioned, and even on that one, I think the original quote was, many hours of purposeful practice will lead to perfection. And 10,000 hours has been sort of used. It's probably many hours. And this, again, I'll come back to one thing that I'll probably talk about later, is about if we can build into each day just doing something that works toward many goals, you will find that actually on a daily basis, we're doing, say, 15 minutes or 30 minutes of practice, which, you might not see for a long time, but by the end of the year, you go, I'm actually a lot better than I was at the start of the year. So that's what I'm improving on. That's what I'm working towards. So the greater clarity we have on those things we want to improve on, and then the better we are at just putting these pockets of times together to keep improving those things. It also helps you with the awareness of learning, which again, I'll talk about that sort of. Some people don't realize that when sometimes we're watching TV, we're learning, because you're just watching the news and you see someone present for the first time and you go, I quite like how they just did that then, or I quite liked how they answered that tricky question. Or currently, if you're watching politics, I really wouldn't answer that question how they've just answered it. But you're seeing that sort of learning. And again, looking back to, remember the COVID updates, and we had Chris Wilkes coming out and Boris Johnson, and they'd put a graph up and you're thinking they shouldn't be using that. But instead of being critical, I'm thinking, well, what would I have done? And I remember going back, me and Ian were practicing doing new graphs and stuff like that, and thinking, should we send this to them to help them do better data visualization? But you realize everything you're watching, you're learning, even film sort of thing, you sort of take things from that, whether it be the motivation to keep working, keep trying, keep improving, especially watching things like Rocky or something like that. It just means that you're taking something from that and thinking, I'll apply that to what I'm doing today.
I think it's brilliant. And that kind of the concept of taking something wherever you can, and the importance of that to learning. I mean, it lends itself then to the question, how do you learn? And we were talking the other day, and you said you had some fascinating insights on actually what is learning, and you've just touched some of that then. But for you then, how to learn is important, isn't it? And I guess at the forum, I always think of the forum as a center of learning. You've got learning at your very heart of what you do. It's all the way through it. That kind of defines you guys as an organization. But when you say how to learn, what do you mean?
Yeah, no, good question. I'm still not 100% sure of the answer myself, but what I've learned and what the forum really promote is that doing something different every day. It's realizing that learning is a range of things. It's not just this information. That's one part of, sort of one tiny part of a jigsaw. It's not even an edge piece. It's just one part of something that you can build out from that. And in turn, that gives you new knowledge, but it also is about a change. What you're going to do with that knowledge, your attitude and your behaviour, and that difference that's going to make. So one of the things we did at the forum, produced for the first time earlier this year, was our sort of learning pyramid, which is around how you've got things you have to learn. There's mandatory learning. So if you think of it as a child, you learn to breathe. I had no idea that's what happened. That's why when you watch a baby, your first child, and sometimes they go for a period of not breathing. You go, don't panic. It's okay. They're learning to breathe. So I remember the first time seeing Martha, they go, oh, she's not breathing. No, she's all right. She's okay. She'll breathe again, because you sort of learn that action of how to do that. Then you learn everything from learning how to eat from say solids and all those things. So school is the obvious time where you go, well, that's mandatory learning. We have to do that. We've got to, get certain things before we can progress. Too often, though, when you go to work, you only ever see learning as mandatory. Oh, I've been put on that bloody training course again. You know what I mean? Which can too often happen. Or, oh, I have to learn this because it's a new process. And again, we should be aware that, yeah, there's things that's positive that we need to learn, because as a business, every business changes. Every business has a new strategy, a new direction, new key performance indicators, new customers, new people sat around you, new systems. So therefore, you've got to learn. So the awareness that being able to function in that changing environment means you have adapted. If you've not adapted, fair enough, you've not learned. But most people will adapt, and I don't think people are aware of that. And then there's a responsibility of people to go and seek new learning. So for me, back in the day, I was aware I needed to learn about airlines, because I knew about countries of the world. I knew about the cities, because I know all my European football teams. That came in really, really handy. I know where everything is. And actually, once you start learning your airlines, there's only so many airlines. You know then where they fly to, which would be the quickest routes. So you have to do that. But I did that off my own back, because that for me felt like the logical way of learning. And again, what you want to do is let people know, almost set an expectation to people, is to say, see what you can do with your job, see how you can improve it. And again, that's what we see at the best examples of organizations, whereby people feel empowered to say, can we try this in improving this process improvement? And again, team leaders sort of being able to try and pull that out of their people by giving them the opportunity to say, what's the best thing about what you've done? What's the worst thing you've done? And again, being allowed to say, look, I've made a really big mistake there because I did this, this, and this. And not going, well, don't do that again. Okay, well, which bits could you not do again? And how did you get there? Really understanding those things. And that in turn helps people learn, because our conversation the other day was around how often we hear from organizations who do surveys, and at the staff survey, the staff engagement has come in low because people have said they've not had any learning in the last 12 months. And it happens too often. And it's one of these things you think, how's that happened? It's not because there hasn't been any learning there. There's been lots of opportunities, but people have closed their eyes. They've not realized mandatory learning is learning. And because they've not been given anything else and they've not gone and done it themselves, they've then said, I've not learned. And the solution isn't to go, well, there's some learning for you. Because again, that's one of the challenges we have. We have people who contact us and say we need to put our people through learning, and they pay sometimes a lot of money to put people through learning programs, and they don't do it. They don't turn up. I mean, there's only so much you can do, isn't there? Even when we used to get people in a workshop, they'd come there for 2 days, and then we'd always get them to complete an action plan at the end, say, well, what are you going to do next? We'd highlight, if you go back to the office tomorrow and clear your emails and then talk about it, by day 3, day 4, you're going to have forgotten you've been on a training course yet. And that's what they do too often. Again, we've seen people over the years and done the same training course, and they've gone, oh, it was brilliant. They go, well, you saw this 2 years ago. It can very easily happen. And I think that's what's really important. That I think to my mind, I won't say it's a very general statement to make, but I think a lot of people don't know what learning is. I don't think we've had that. I don't think it's one of those conversations. It's as if we go through school, you go to college, go to university or whatever, and then you just go into the world of work. People think, oh, you stop your learning at that point. You know, and I think it's really important that we go, actually, everything we do every day is learning, just to adapt and to thrive. And actually, it's not nice to say this, but everyone's got a responsibility to do that. You know, and I think when people hear that for the first time, they go, yeah, do you know what? If I could just give 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, that's 65 hours a week or whatever it is, a year sort of thing. That would soon add up to a lot of learning, and that's the reason why I can be better.
I remember when I first started, I was first as a contact center manager. I said to my team leaders, we're going to have, I'm going to put in for you guys 15 minutes self-development time in the day. And then our next sort of the next day's huddle, to embed this, I just want to hear what you've done. And it was tough. It was tough because people were like, I just didn't have time. Yeah. I said, well, I'm only talking about 15 minutes. The other challenge was I just didn't know what to do, or there's nothing that I didn't know where to go. And at the time, we had, the company I was working at, we had a library that sat online, and it had loads of courses, absolutely loads. If it had been a physical library, it would have been very dusty, because it just kind of sat there, and most people didn't know about it. And even when they did, they didn't kind of access it. But I can remember one team leader just really bought into this, and she dedicated 15 minutes and just started doing a course. Now, you couldn't even get, you're scratching the surface of a course on one 15-minute stint. But guess what? In a couple of weeks' time, and I knew this was like the moment when, for whatever reason, for some of them it was competitiveness, but others it was, oh, when she started applying, she was like, yeah, I've nearly finished the second course. And you're like, what, are you doing more than 15 minutes a day? No, but I've just been doing my 15 minutes a day. And before you know it, here I am. I've done one course on having difficult conversations. I'm now doing one on presenting skills. And you could see then everyone else going, right, well, I'm going to get in on this. But it was that, just making it important, making it part of her day, and then realizing, oh, I like this, I'm developing something new. And then critically, I'm going to try it out, or I feel a little bit more prepared if I do have to have a difficult conversation in this example. But there was something else you said as well, is we have to create the environment as leaders where it's okay. Well, A, that's prioritized, but B, it's okay for people to fail. You mentioned kind of you doing your speaking and knowing that the first one might not have been perfect, but you were okay with that because you were going to learn from it. And that's such an important concept of learning, isn't it?
Definitely. I think it's still a problem that it's all about cover up, isn't it? You look at the government, unfortunately, at this moment in time, and over the years, they'll never go, or very rarely will they go, we've made a mistake. Even the most recent worst ever budget that's ever been done was apparently a distraction, not a mistake. It's those things of going, and it almost limits learning, doesn't it? Because it's not saying we've made a mistake, so we're going to do this is what we're going to do differently. Yeah, many organizations are still about cover up, because if there's a problem, it becomes finger pointing. Well, whose fault was that? And I think, again, coming back to my time in the operation of learning this, resource planning gets the finger pointed at them, because forecasts are always wrong. That's what they are. They're either lucky or wrong. You've always got your people in the wrong place at the wrong time, because despite your best intentions, someone's going to do something that no one planned for, and that invariably comes back to you. And it's very quick to realize that that's actually not my fault. It's not the team's fault. We've done the best that we can. This is what's happened. That's what we need to stop happening tomorrow. And I think that helps to do that sort of more black box thinking, to quote the Matthew Saeed book on that, which I think is a tremendous book. That idea of, if there is failure, work out how there is failure. Because if not, the other side of that is, when you have a good day, too often people go around giving high fives, going, we've had a great day. And then you go, well, what did we do differently? and no one really knows. We've just had a good day. It's almost like the stars have aligned on a certain day and everything's worked out well. So we go, that's brilliant, then let's go on to the next day. And then you have a bad day. Well, what happens? Well, if we learn from the good day and then we learn from the bad day, we can start to sort of shape what happens on future days. And okay, just keep that openness there. But yeah, environment is a huge part of this. You say that example of your team leaders. You know, that team leader becomes a role model for their learning. Their team is naturally going to think, that looks really good, that's great what they're doing. And again, most of the team will probably go, I can do that, and it's possible for me, and it's only 15 minutes, only 10 minutes a day. Whereas the team leader or manager who hasn't got time, without realizing that sort of what they believe as a strong work ethic of, I'm working hard, we always get stuff done, and yeah, we don't have time for learning, we've got to keep going. Well, that's now their environment and mindset. And that's okay for a short period of time because we are busy. But over 6 months, over a quarter, even over 12 months, so if you go, we've not had time for learning, that really means they are not adapting well to the circumstances and changing environment. And again, over a longer period of time, that means that they're probably gonna get stuck, you know, and really be out of date. I say a few times I've spoken about the boiling frog syndrome. So I'm not sure if anyone's mentioned that on one of your previous ones about the study. I'm not sure how true it is, if it's a myth or not. But the idea is being that if you have a pan of boiling water and put a frog inside it, it will jump straight out because the frog knows that that is too hot to survive in, just get straight out. Whereas if you put a frog into some sort of tepid water, I believe, and then start to boil it gently, the frog will stay there because it just feels warm, it feels comfortable, it's nice and cozy, and then it goes, I'm actually being boiled from the inside, it can't now jump out. And thinking of that about, say, some of the big organizations like Woolworths or Blockbuster, for instance, that for years they were doing quite well, but not really seeing what was going on in the environment behind them. And even the year before Blockbuster famously sort of went, it had quite a good year. There's some shops in particular who were still doing really, really well. Yet as a business, they just weren't adapting, and then they didn't have time to react. So though it's still a strong brand name now, and I can use it, people go, oh yeah, it's the video shop. You know, it doesn't exist because they left it too late before they could react from that. And there's a real danger as people, as professionals, or anyone in your career, that we're going to be those people. We're those people in your business who've been there with the 35 years service, who are going, I'm waiting for retirement now. And you go, that's in 10 years time. That's a long time to sit still, holding everyone else back because you just want retirement now. You know, whereas if you were to thrive, you could be a role model, you could help mentor new people because of your corporate knowledge. You could really change that dynamic to make it really inspiring role for those last few years, not that sort of elephant's graveyard of people you just essentially can't wait to get rid of. But that happens in some sort of larger organizations. But I think again, those sorts of, you know, metaphors or anecdotes around, if we don't change, this is what's going to happen, are really important. I mean, I only learned that one about 10 years ago when I read a book from Rasmus Ankerson around the gold mine effect, and that was around where does talent come from, and it's not from sort of expensive buildings and lots of investment. It's often around people getting that sort of grit and desire and purpose, and realizing how we get better and how we can move on from that is where true talent can come from.
Do you think then people listening to this that are in senior leadership positions, it might be of a certain age, and I've seen this where that kind of, you very eloquently said about the concept of I'm waiting, I've hit my level. Is that something else then that stops learning? Is if you've got senior leaders in place who have been successful and can you say that they've kind of stopped learning? I
think so, yeah. I think there can be an over-reliance on experience. Now, again, it's not nice to say these good things have come out of COVID. You'd hope, though, that sort of experience is now limited because of what happened with COVID. So you'd like to think senior leaders have gone, hang on a minute, we can't just rely upon our experience anymore. We have to be thinking about other things. But I do agree, I think that is a problem. I think a problem with a lot of managers. I think people get to a level that they become happy with. Now, that doesn't always mean they become stale, but it can become a contributor towards that. Anyone who's been in the same role for a long period of time who isn't still learning. Now, again, that doesn't need to be learning within that role. One of our members, again, has got some great tenured staff. And what they recognized was that there's no point in them keep learning business things, because that doesn't motivate them. But actually, if they learn another skill actually outside of work, that actually really helps them with their engagement again. So again, I think just the fact you are learning, and you can see that you're learning, you can see there's an improvement, I think is really important. But I think, yeah, there is a real danger that people get towards the maybe 50s, I don't know, a little bit older than that, and start to go into that wind down, looking to drop a day, and almost thinking, oh, as I'm getting older, I can't be as active. And again, all the science is telling us now there's very, very little difference between, I mean, obviously elite athletes at the age of 28 to 32, that sort of peak age, and someone at 60, there's a decent, there's quite a difference. But actually, as a yoga, if you're into yoga, into body balance, even into sort of the gym and stuff like that, the difference is minimal. And if anything, if your purposeful practice has got you to a point, you could actually be in the best shape of your life in your 60s or 70s, which again must put you in I can't understand why you wouldn't want to be like that, because you want to keep learning, you want to keep being better, even at a golden age.
How often do you come across the refrain that the company or who I work for don't give me enough training, learning?
Yeah, I suppose we see that. We've not seen it as much recently, but what we do often see is when times get hard and budget cuts happen, these are the things that often get removed. I think there is a better understanding now of the value of learning and employee engagement and well-being. And again, a key part of well-being is learning something, being connected, and being sort of healthy, both mentally and physically. Being healthy mentally means you are growing as a person. So I'm hopeful that that's going to stay. Yet, unfortunately, the next 12 months, I think, is going to be a bit of a tricky time. So therefore, some cuts could go in. I think there are some organisations who have a genuine learning culture. That sort of like learning culture, everyone has got an opportunity to do something. And again, there's so much free learning out there. I think that's the thing that we often forget. It's about how to tap into that. Is say the internal library that's just covered in dust, to the internal library that actually people are actually now bringing stuff into it. It's a bit like how almost creating your own Wikipedia. People learn something. Well, let's leave that in the knowledge management here because someone else will find it interesting. I think there is still a little bit of, in maybe some corporate environments, where learning is quite mandated, going back to that sort of learning pyramid, and actually, we are going to cut costs, we need to improve efficiencies. So yes, you can't have that 15 minutes every day of learning now, and that'd be a real shame if that does come in. I mean, as I say, fortunately, a lot of our members, naturally, if their members want to learn, so that means they're usually in a good place. But there's many organizations who aren't members, and when we speak to them, either look at learning as a cost, which is, I think, always a negative, as opposed to being something that's value add, or something they haven't got time for, which again is a real shame. Because if someone isn't a member of an industry body, or isn't doing any other external learning, in 2, 3, 4 years time, that's going to really limit their capabilities, which would be such a shame for them. And then it's a huge step change they're then requiring. So then needs a huge amount of money to help them to become better, or it needs lots of recruitment or things like that. So I think it can be a problem. I'd like to think it's not as big a problem as it was.
So how, other than, let's say, people and organizations can engage with you guys at the forum, what do you say to people about how do you individually and from an organizational point of view build a learning habit? And a word that you said to me the other day that I really liked, which was that like a rhythm of learning. How do you start people on getting that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things. If I give a couple of examples, one is where we do a bit of team learning over the course of a year. So we give people access to on-demand modules, so you can watch them anytime, any place, on any device, app, or on your PC. And then we do monthly catch-ups with them. And the aim of that is to sort of, it's definitely not shaming, but you're recognizing people who haven't done anything. So when you get to that week, that monthly tutorial, right, going, what have you learned? And you always say, please don't say I've not had time to watch anything. Just say, you know, and you think after 3 months, you've usually got even the stragglers on there, because the ones who are, again, watching stuff and engaging and getting even more out of it. So I think that helps to sort of do that rhythm. And if you do that for 12 months, you definitely build the habit, build the learning, you get a group of togetherness, that sort of team learning way. In terms of some of the individual things we do a 6-month pathway. And again, that works around this idea of monthly tutorials. So you've got your on-demand material, so there's no excuse that you can't watch that. And again, we make sure it's not over-facing by giving people too much. So the more you come and speak to us, the more we can tailor your journey by saying, we recommend watching that next, reading that next, speaking to them next, etc. So again, you're removing that sort of indecision, because, you know, there is no doubt that sometimes when there's so many things out there, it can be very hard to know what to do next. And again, a lot of our audience are quite introverted people. We're quite sort of specialists, especially some of our data analysts sort of thing, by their very nature, and very detailed. So if you don't give them exact what's next and what's the next step, that they're almost go, well, there's too much information here, I can't get to the detail. So we're aware of that from the learning style. So we can be quite open, keep it casual, make it down to you. But then giving people, if you're really uncertain, we recommend you doing these following things, and that helps. And we've got 1 or 2 member examples whereby they do now give that allocated time to learn. So one member gives 2 hours every week, which it was fun. That's a lot of time. But then you see what they're doing. You're going, wow, they are growing as a team. This is a resource planning team that is now sort of really the sort of guardians of data, of people, of technology, you know, really working into other areas, almost outsourcing their planning to other areas of the business, so they can plan for the marketing team, plan for the HR team, because they've got that capability. And because people seeing the return of that, it makes it easier to do that. But giving people that time every single week just puts that responsibility onto people to say, look, there's, you've got the time now. So that's usually the biggest hurdle, I've got time. So there's your time, that's protected. What have you now done in that time? And then also helping people to realize that what learning is, knowledge, attitude, behaviors. Again, here's the opportunity now to share those things, because there is a monthly tutorial, there's a monthly team sharing session as well. And then the quarterly sort of health checks, it's asking people specifically about the learning. It's not leaving it to 12 months down the line and saying to people, what have you done? Finding out they've not done anything and then being too late. There's so many checkpoints along the way. So those are the key. The final thing that I'd say on this is, and one of the things we cover off a lot when we speak to people in workshops, when we speak to people in our sort of learning pathways, is around how we've now given people, hopefully, the rhythm, that habit of doing these things. Now, here's a few other examples. So for me, I still give myself 15 minutes every morning. So I found out that mornings are my best time to do a bit of a review of yesterday, think about what I need to do for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. And that sort of 15 minutes can sometimes grow into 30. It can sometimes end up being 5 minutes. It can sometimes be an hour. It might end up even being, I've missed it for 2 days. But because on the whole, most of the time, I give myself that bit of time, it means that I can plan my week. I can plan what I'm going to spend my time on, making sure that's on the time that matters most. It makes sure that I'm doing things that is around development, not just BAU, phone call after phone call after phone call. And it's also making sure that I've got a view on actually, where do I need to be in 3 months, 6 months? Are we already thinking about those things? Because there's things I could be doing now that can be working towards that. And again, having that view of the future, then pulling it back to now, can just give you that clarity of actually, if I don't need to do this, it might be important today, but actually doing this thing is going to give me a better advantage for sort of six months time. So I think giving people the confidence of protecting that time, giving people the knowledge that learning is so easy. You know, even reading a website, register for Harvard Business Review, and you get tip of the day, and that they're doing it for you. They're giving you a tip. You know, it's up to you if you want to read that or not. And letting people just to build that rhythm of going on LinkedIn and reading an article. If you read a book, then share it with someone. All of a sudden, turns you from being someone who wasn't aware of doing it to someone who's now a role model of learning, who's actually inspired someone else, and that person is now inspiring you because they're the one recommending you articles and books to read. So it becomes quite a sort of a nice cycle, really, but a very easy one not to do at all.
And this sort of taps into this concept you mentioned earlier on about, and I will often say, people will say, who are you competing with? Who do you see as your competitors? And it sounds glib, but it's true. The only person I'm competing with is myself, you know. And that kind of, you mentioned earlier about just getting on the pathway of progression and wanting to be better than you were yesterday, a week ago, a month ago. What kind of tips can you give people then to kind of, they want to be better? And it's that's a very generalized kind of statement. You know, I want to be a better juggler, you know.
No, I think it is a good question. I think what I'd say first of all on this one is that don't worry if you don't know, because I think a lot of people get stuck there. I don't know what I want to be better at. I haven't got a 5-year plan. There's so many examples of people out there who've been either had this sort of laser eye dream sort of thing, I want to fly sort of thing, and that guy who jumped out of space, you know, or I want to do this in 5 years' time, and they're following that. If you haven't got that, don't worry about that. That's my starting point on this. It doesn't matter. There's many successful people who just keep doing something a little bit different each day, and do you know what? They find that out. What I would say is start to just read, I think, and speak to people. That would be my two things. If you don't know what to read, start speaking to people. When you speak to people, they'll recommend a book. Read that, and then you get that cycle sort of going. Don't mind failing. As I said before, read a book. If it wasn't for you, you now know that isn't for you. That is tremendous learning. You know that is not the path to go down. As I joked before, going into Cirque du Soleil is not quite my thing, but I know that. So therefore, I'm not going to put my time into sort of doing acrobats. I'm going to put my time into the things that I want to do. The other one, I suppose, technique, which can be a bit stark, is just to think about what it is you want to do in sort of 50 years time. You know, you're talking to your great grandchildren. What do you want to be like? What story do you want to tell them? The story that, well, I worked hard for years and then took retirement, and then I've been sitting in this chair now, and I thought this would see me through, but it's not quite working. Is that the story? And at the same time, you don't have to be the person that goes to Disneyland after every year and run an ultra marathon, but you want to have something that's interesting. And actually, a lot of things can be learned quite quick. You can learn the guitar probably to a very good standard in about 5 years. I think 5 years, that's a long time, but actually in 5 years time we'll go, I wish I'd started playing the guitar, because I would have been quite good by now. And it's just thinking of those things. Think back to your childhood, about the toys that you had, or whatever that you went, I used to love that. And even though, you know, I joke aside with my daughter at the moment, when I was young, I used to love wrestling. WCW wrestling was absolutely brilliant. I remember thinking I could never be a wrestler, but I could have been a wrestling manager. And there is actually now a wrestling club in Preston. You think, why don't I do that sort of thing? That could be hilarious just to do for a while. And so saying those little stories to her, it makes her think, actually, you can do whatever you want, sort of thing. It's just up to you to just sort of reimagine these things. And I started collecting Star Wars figures again, because loved it when I was younger, and then my mum started throwing it out, and that's when it made me realize I love them figures. So we've still got the Ewok village at home, and you start thinking that's how we can collect some of those things, and just go back to what gave you a bit of passion in the past, and that might give you that little bit of interest, which goes, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. So for me, one of the things I've always wanted to do is become a personal trainer. So again, in 10, 15 years time, I definitely want to start being a yoga instructor. That's one of the things I want to help, but in particular to help people, men in particular, who refuse to stretch, refuse to do anything, because we know what we can be like at times, and to really help people, give them a great sort of last few years of their life, because too often people stop doing things because they can't get up out of chairs. And I just think actually a few simple exercises each day, you can give people greater mobility, greater feeling, greater factor of life. So I think those things are all inside you. Just think back to what your core interests are, and don't limit yourself. You know, don't think, well, I can't do that anymore, because you can. And what's the worst that could happen if you gave it a go and you didn't? You know what, you might have enjoyed yourself for a few hours. So that'd be my sort of advice on that.
I love it. I feel really motivated, actually. That's great. I definitely want to talk to you about yoga as well. I'm still playing football twice a week with people way like half my age, and when you meet me, you see I'm like a little chunky gorilla. You can never say I'm flexible, but that kind of the concept of stretching and just doing something completely different and being okay that you will be terrible at it. That's the kind of thing I look back on last year. I did dancing, you know, with a group of guys, and we committed to training, and we were awful. But by the end, we were all very proud of our performance, and all our girls were very, very proud of us. But that only started because we committed to doing something, and we stuck at it. And you know, the training sessions where our instructor was just tearing her hair out with just how uncoordinated and things we were. But now I look back on that with a real sense of pride, and it does start, like, you've definitely, that little end bit there motivated me to go again, to do something different, to start now is the message, isn't it? Start.
Absolutely. Yeah, why not? What's the worst that could happen? I think is a nice way to, and don't think, yeah, that's a great idea, I'll do that tomorrow. No, do it today. Whatever, you know, just give it a go. And you say often it is 5 minutes is 5 more minutes than nothing. So 15 minutes actually is quite a good time. 30 minutes, great yoga session. You can have a great workout in half an hour. You can watch something purposeful on TV. You can watch a TED talk in that time. It's not much time, but you've just got to protect it. And again, you think if you were to just map out your day, and again, it might not come as a surprise, I did actually do for a long time, plan my day by half an hour, okay, which sounds a bit excessive, but bearing in mind 8 of it you're fast asleep, you've not got many hours left, and then you're at work for most of it. You realize how you've got to make the most of your mornings and your evenings. And if you do that, that gives you the time. So I'm up at 6 each morning, so I can do a bit of reading, I can do some sort of class or a run or some sort of form of exercise, take the dog for a walk. Then I can spend time with my daughter before she goes to school, walk her to school every day. And it makes those things, you realize how important those things are. And at the same time, then I'm always then ready for work because I've prepared myself mentally and physically before I do those things. Make the most of the time at the end of the day. You don't just sit there watching TV waiting for the next program to happen. You go, no, I'm going to not put the TV on because I'll watch TV later. It's little things like that, and we can all probably relate to those sort of bad habits we've got of just having a little sit down. There's nothing wrong with having just to sit down, but when having just to sit down becomes pretty much all of the hours you've got left outside of your working day or sleeping, you're probably not making the most of your time.
Bill, this has been brilliant. I've absolutely loved it. I'm super motivated now.
Good.
I hope everyone else that is listening is as well. And I'm sure we're going to do a couple more of these. And look, it's been absolutely brilliant. Phil Anderson of the Forum, thank you very, very much.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Martin.